Cursor announced some things. One of the biggest things is a GitHub competitor. It's called Origin. This does pose the question of what does GitHub look like if it's designed specifically for an agent or an AI-driven world.
They have all the pieces. Now they have the capitalization to do it. I'm excited.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Agents Hour. I'm Shane. I'm one of the co-founders of Mastra. I'm here with Abhi, one of the other co-founders of Mastra. What's up, dude?
Oh man, I am sweating my ass off here. If you all didn't watch the last episode, I'm traveling in France right now. Last week we were at Vivatech, which was a huge conference, and it was 35 degrees Celsius, which I didn't even know what that was. Now I'm very accustomed to that number. It's like 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Even at nighttime, it's hot, and there's no air conditioning here.
All right. It's that time of week. We're going to talk about the news. There's drama. Let's get into it. We talked last week a lot about Fable. So this post came in, said this changes the Fable story completely. I don't know if this is actually confirmed, but we talked last week about how Amazon maybe reported that Fable could be jailbroken. And according to this, on June 11th, Mythos breached classified systems of the NSA within a very short time frame. So maybe that led to some of the decisions to pull Fable. There's a lot of speculation of whether it's political. Trump was on our interview talking about the decision and wanting to figure out a path to resolution. Who knows how the things fall? I still think that there's a lot that's up in the air. I do also think that if you're Anthropic and you're saying that this is the most dangerous model and that's the hype you're building around the model, then when you have some kind of incident, you shouldn't be surprised when the government wants to take action on that, when you've been trying to fear monger everyone into knowing, and maybe it's true, maybe this is true, but you shouldn't be surprised when that happens. Hopefully, it would be great to have a Fable level model back, but I don't think there's any kind of immediate timeline on what that might be before we get access to it again.
The All In podcast had a really good discussion on these details as well. And I think David Sachs really put it well. He was just like, you asked for it. You've been telling everybody that it's the most dangerous thing. And so you can't really fault anybody for acting on that information. Yeah,
if you say it's the biggest threat to national security, you're saying it's going to take everyone's jobs. And then you're saying that this model can do that. But the model we released has guardrails, but then someone else clearly shows, well, the guardrails can be broken. Yep. Then all the other stuff you said is still true. I suspect we're going to see maybe you need to provide a ID in order to access these models or something, which then in that case, maybe Fable isn't available through the API or something. I don't know how you're going to validate the use of this and actually track it over time. And again, that would still be limited to people in the US, according to what the government originally said, which isn't great either for people outside that still want to have access to this level of intelligence. In other news, Sam Altman and OpenAI announced that GPT-5.5 Cyber is here in its state-of-the-art performance on Cyber Gym, actually beating Mythos preview. So I guess it, beat Fable, beat Mythos. Mythos is the underlying model without the guardrails. And so arguably, we already have a cybersecurity model that you could at least argue, according to benchmarks, is as good and is publicly available, right? Or is it actually been released? Or did they just announce it? I don't know if everyone has access. Yeah, I don't know if everyone has access to it yet. Some people do. We will see how it gets rolled out.
We are not those people, but some people do.
The interesting thing is, it's not the only model. Other models are going to catch up. So it's not just that Mythos is this super sophisticated model, which it may be, but the other model companies are not that far behind, it seems. And OpenAI announced we're expanding OpenAI Daybreak to help democratize patching vulnerable software at machine speed. So Codex security plugin, the full version of GPT 5.5 cyber model. And this was announced on June 22nd, so yesterday. We also started to get teasers that OpenAI is cooking up a new model. So there were some potential leaks yesterday that point to maybe a drop today, which didn't happen. But a larger context, or 1.5 million token context, major gains in long horizon coding, agentic workflows, faster codex responses, aggressive pricing to undercut Anthropic.
This is such an opportunity for OpenAI.
It is. I actually heard on a call this week with a customer that said, we want to use Anthropic, but the reliability, we can't ship it to prod.
Yeah.
They point blank said, we need to be, and is one of the reasons for choosing Mastra is to be multi-model model agnostic for the things that they're doing, but that's challenging, right? If you can't believe that the reliability, and this is, not to say anything about the politics or Fable, but if you can't be reliable to a level where you can throw production traffic at it, you have to have a backup fallback. And if you have to have a backup fallback, maybe you just go to that model as the primary model.
Yeah. We've had 4 partial outages on Claude API yesterday, today, and then last week as well. It's been kind of rough.
So there is news, though. This came out earlier today. GPT-5.6 has been delayed and will no longer release this week. The new target is mid-July. Also, some other just interesting updates. Apparently, DeepMind is not satisfied with the current state of 3.5 Pro, and so it's not going to be planned on launching this month. And then apparently there's some other potential models coming out. We might be a little ways away from getting models that maybe could push the limits of what Fable was at least alleging on benchmarks, right? It's coming, but apparently, teams are running into challenges. But let's talk about some open weight model that's making waves, GLM 5.2. I think the overall initial reaction is a lot of people are excited.
It's dope, dude.
You can see percentage score on agentic coding, the average tokens per task, and you can see where GLM 5.2 is versus 5.1. You can see where Opus 4.8, Opus 4.7. So you can see it's very close to Opus 4.8 level intelligence. A little bit less token usage on at least the max level tasks, and the score is just a little bit lower. So we'll call it near-Opus level.
I've been using it pretty extensively. It's pretty slow on the Z plan, but if you use it through Alibaba Cloud, it's pretty fast because they have infrastructure, of course. Comparing it, I guess we'll talk more about it, but my initial reaction is it's not as good as 4.8 Opus. Because with 4.8 Opus, you could just coast a little bit on the loops. With the GLM, you still have to be in the loop for complex things, but it's pretty damn good.
Yeah, I think the things that I've been hearing is, it's not going to be quite as good for the long horizon tasks, but it follows instructions really well. So if you know what you want and you are able to be on the loop a little bit, you can get what you want pretty quickly. This was last week. Breaking GLM 5.2 is now first on Design Arena. It's now jumped ahead of the now unavailable Fable 5 and its open weights. So you can see it's ahead of Fable 5, ahead of Opus 4.8 on Design Arena. So this is a little bit anecdotal, but Klein ran a small benchmark on just one. I think it was just one problem, right? So it's hard to judge on a single problem, but GLM 5.2 beat Opus 4.8 on the same bug, same prompt, and it was much cheaper. It did use twice as many tokens, apparently, but because the tokens are so much cheaper, it was actually cheaper overall.
It calls a lot of tools, is what I've noticed. So
it's probably quite a bit slower, too, because of that, right? It's already a little bit slower, probably, per token, and so not as fast. I've seen a lot of anecdotal evidence, and here's another one. So there's now 1-bit GLM 5.2, and this is comparing against Opus 4.8 and 5.5. So it gave 3 models the same prompt and compared one-shot outputs. And you can see it's pretty comparable. I think the 1-bit GLM 5.2 is arguably just as good. Different styles, whatever. And so this is wild, because this is the 1-bit model you can run locally on a Mac Studio M3 Ultra with 256 gigabytes of RAM. And that's what Ward on our team has. So he wants to run it. We'll see. I think it's a little slow.
It's going to be slow. 21.6 tokens per second. We're starting to look at this metric, tokens per second now, as we get into different models with different hardware. Because no one really was thinking about how many tokens per second am I getting? But I know we're going to add it to Mastra code, but I foresee us starting to care about that metric pretty soon.
Yeah, and I think it depends. I care less about tokens per second if it's a fire and forget task, right? So if I know I'm going to come back in an hour, if it takes an hour and 10 minutes or 50 minutes, it's not that big a deal. If it's something where I want to ride the actual loop itself and be very close to it, then faster is going to be a lot better. In the world where imagine you have 1,000 tokens per second, it can go about as fast as at some point it can go as fast as you can think, right? You can say what you need, and before you even can flip to the next tab in your browser, the next tab in your coding agent, it's going to be basically done. So you might as well just ride that same loop. And I think that is going to be a big unlock where you no longer have to multitask and try to keep, multiple loops going at the same time because you kick something off and you don't want to wait 2 minutes for it to finish. So you go do something else. It'll be nice if, as we continue to get models that are smaller, faster, we can eventually get to the point where you never have to leave the coding session you're on. You can stay on one loop.
Dude, did you subscribe?
Dude, I host the show. Did you subscribe?
Did you subscribe?
Subscribe to Agents Hour every Monday, noon Pacific. All right, Cursor Compile. They announced some things. One of the biggest things is a GitHub competitor. It's called Origin. It's called Origin. Going to be available this fall, so join the waitlist. Obviously, Cursor, the acquisition with SpaceX was officially approved. I think it was $60 billion was the amount. We talked about it on the show when it was announced. But after the SpaceX acquisition, it's now kind of been, I guess, ratified, so to speak. Swix, of course, talked about this as well. Cursor's long-awaited Git competitor, scalable for agent workloads, extensible with API and MCP, and built-in merge conflicts and co-failure agent resolution. So this does pose the question of what does Git or GitHub look like if it's designed specifically for an agent or an AI-driven world, where coding agents are writing 90% of the code, right? Or 95% of the code.
Yeah, and like if you were a Graphite user and like, you know, we know Meryl, like that was always the goal, was to eventually destroy GitHub. And they have all the pieces. Now they have the capitalization to do it. I'm excited. They're cooking.
And so some highlights from the keynote. I actually watched a good chunk of this keynote. It was pretty good. But they did announce a few different things during the keynote. They're also training their own frontier model. And in Cursor Mobile, you're going to be able to prompt agents, edit code, and remotely control your desktop cursor from your phone. So, Abhi, you can take it with you on the beach, you know, for real now. I think Cursor, you know, the acquisition to SpaceX was probably the best landing spot for it because it gives SpaceX something and xAI something they didn't have. It gives Cursor the actual cluster because this new model that they're talking about is going to be trained, of course, on Colossus. So they have access to, you know, able to use Colossus to do this training so they can actually be more competitive. We'll see how their model stacks up. They're obviously getting they're kind of late entrants to the game, but they have a lot of data, right? They have a lot of people that have used Cursor, so they have a lot of coding data that they can train on. All right, so Vercel launched Eve, an agent framework. Any thoughts on this? I have a couple.
Oh yeah, the chance to play with it. It's really cool DX. Pretty simple to use.
It's got some magic bundling built in. It's really
I hate bundling.
Yeah, the bundling it's one of those things that it's like a magic feature that, especially getting started, provides such like a silky smooth onboarding experience because you just drop a file in and it's just everything works, right?
Yeah.
And their CLI is pretty nice, so they did a nice job with that. It definitely, you know, pushes you into the Vercel ecosystem early, right? It's like it's very much built towards Vercel infra. It kind of pushes you to use their gateway, pushes you to use, you know, their sandboxes, all that. But overall, like pretty good DX, just as like get out of the box, getting started. I think some of the bundling magic, depending on what you're doing, might end up biting them. We'll see. Like maybe they can figure it out. But I think that'll be the thing I would watch for, is we'll see how that works out. It was cool to see. And just shipped Flue 1.0 beta. So, you know, Flue, we've talked about, it was announced a while back, right? But the 1.0 beta is here. It's funny because, you know, this one says it's like Astro for agents, invoking the old like Astro versus Next.js, because, you know, Vercel says it's like Next.js for agents. So that's pretty funny. Abhi and I obviously were at Gatsby before this, so we were up against them in the past with React-based frameworks, and now it feels like what's old is new again.
Here we go again.
The battle is upon us again.
I will swear, Mastra is not the Gatsby for agents.
No, Mastra is not the Gatsby of agents.
Mastra is the Mastra for agents.
More being shipped, just really improving developer experience. So Codex, you can show a workflow once and you can reuse it as a skill. So Replay lets you do a recurring task. You turn that into a skill. It's kind of like, in some ways, dynamic workflows of sorts that you can have a dynamic workflow in Claude Code, save that workflow, run it again. So a lot of these different primitives start to like overlap quite a bit.
Yeah.
Claude introduced Claude Tag, a new way for teams to work with Claude. So in Slack, Claude joins as a team member with access to the channels and tools you choose. Tag Claude in and delegate tasks to it while you focus on other work. I think for us, internally, we've been using a ton of Mastra-built agents in Slack. I think Slack is an interface that's going to be very popular for agents because it's where your team communicates. So especially for internal agents that are meant to assist or help team members, you probably just want those in Slack or in Teams. We've talked about this before. Replit's doing it as well. So Replit's now inside Slack HQ. So tell Slackbot what you want to build and it'll pull in Replit to make it happen straight from the conversation. So you can build using Replit right in Slack as well as tagging in Claude now. Dude, did you see this?
Yeah, dude.
What? To set the stage, if you're listening and not watching, Midjourney, the company that you would prompt in Discord and get an image back, right? Like That was Midjourney. That was my experience with Midjourney. I know they've improved. I think there's a web UI now, but you go to Discord, you prompt, you get an image. That was Midjourney, but not anymore. So Midjourney Medical, I watched this and I didn't know. I was like, what is this?
I thought it was like the Alien movie where it's like super high tech.
Yeah, I didn't understand what it was. And then I did a little digging. And essentially, so Midjourney Medical is working on this scanner, this full body scanner that uses like liquid and I don't know, some other technology, right, to image your body and to determine if you might have tumors or some kind of like abnormalities and detect it early.
Yeah, like a CT scan.
Basically like a full scan of your body for like health and medical issues. And they're going to be putting these devices in spas, so like higher end spas, where you can go in and just get a routine scan. And I don't remember what it takes, like a minute or something. It's like super fast. You just go in, you get a scan, and they want to have some ridiculous amount of like 10,000 of these or 1,000 of these over the next few years.
2027.
Yeah, in San Francisco. So you can just go in and get a scan.
24/7 too, available.
It's just wild. So I don't know how far along they are with the technology, but they must think they know how to make it work. They must have signs that, okay, this is working. It can detect, potential problems that you might not even be aware of. And it should really, over time, drive the cost of getting scans like this down. I've heard people say, if this works, these will be available kind of all over. Your local spa, your local, chiropractor, whatever. You just, your local doctor, you can go in and get a scan for super cheap.
I worry that it's a rug pull, but I guess when it comes, maybe Shane and I will go get a scan. We'll let you guys.
Hashim says Theranos 5s, but that's a good idea, dude. When it's available, we're doing a live stream from the outside scanner.
Yeah.
Did you see this one?
Yeah.
So introducing Sakana Fugu.
Fugu?
A full multi-agent orchestration system accessible via a single model API. So our Fugu Ultra model matches the performance of Fable and Mythos, delivering frontier capability without the risk of export controls. So essentially what it does is it's essentially a router between a whole bunch of different models for different types of tasks. So it's like an orchestration API on top of all the existing frontier models that are available.
Yep. You can use 5.5, Opus, Gemini, and you have like all of them available to you. But it itself is closed, right? So closed API using closed models. But this is seeming to be a trend, right? OpenRouter did something very similar.
Factory released apparently a router that could save costs because it routes to different models based on the types of intelligence you need for that task. So I think this idea where you're going to have one model that does everything might not be true. What we're probably going to realize is certain models are good at certain types of tasks. And if you can codify those types of tasks and route those tasks to the right models, well, then you might be not just paying for Claude, maybe you'll pay for Claude for this specific kind of coding task, but this other kind of customer service task goes to GLM, and this other task goes to OpenAI. So I wouldn't be surprised if over time you see tools to really route between different models based on workloads, or have multi-agent systems that use different models under the hood depending on tasks. I mean, we're already seeing it, but I think it's just going to become more prevalent.
The only downside with this is how you benchmark it, because obviously it destroys all the benchmarks, like in a good way. Like it beats all the benchmarks. It's highly effective. But isn't that obvious that it's going to use the model that scored the best? Or
it's like, if it found that, okay, this model can solve these tasks. Well, if it gets asked a task like that, go to this model. And so it really is a little bit of, benchmark maxing of sorts. And I mean, if the benchmarks are truly real world examples, then that's a good thing. But I think we all know that they're not always the case. We kind of talked about it earlier on the show. If you're watching with Dex, like even the coding benchmarks are very much, can it do this one task and pass a test, which doesn't necessarily prove that it can actually write code over long time horizons, because it's just not what the benchmark is measuring. So I think that's the challenge with some of these things. But I do think on a small scale, I think that teams are going to own this routing themselves. Rather than use a single API, I think they're going to say, here are the types of tasks that my system needs to handle. I will benchmark and do some basic evals with some different models. And then I will route the types of tasks to these different agents with these different models based on the tasks that come in. You could basically build your own API that does this like light routing layer to either different agents or the same agent with a different model, behind it.
I think there's going to be like a lot of similar products coming out in this space.
All right, that's it. That's the show. If you have not already, go find Abhi Iyer on X. give Abhi Iyer a follow. Give SM Thomas 3, that's me, a follow on X. Go find Mastra on X, give us a follow. And if you haven't given us a like on or a star on GitHub, we do appreciate that too. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in this week to Agents Hour. We will be back next week on Monday, doing the same thing we do every week. We'll see you then.
Peace.